Look, the first big question you really need to consider is, hi, Jeff Marsati, the Plain English Attorney, and today we have our special guest, Mike Brooks. He is the asset coordinator for our law firm, and he's a wealth of finance and insurance information. So we have been working really well with this group called HD Reach, and there's just so much of a need for information out there that we said, look, let's just try to get together and put together some more information so that it's available online. And we have today, we're going to have several different scenarios lined up as several different questions and things that people are commonly asking in this process of just trying to find information. So, Mike, go ahead, just kind of introduce yourself a little bit with your background, and then we'll jump right into the scenarios.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So yeah, my background is, like Jeff said, financial planning and insurance. Got my license in the state of North Carolina in 2006. So we're going on about 18 years. I found my way into the business dealing with long-term care in my own family. My grandfather, two grandparents died from cancer, unfortunately. That was really not like a long-term care scenario, long debilitating process. But my other grandfather, he had diabetes and for 40 years. And when he got into his 80s, he was in and out of nursing homes and the hospital for a couple years. And we didn't have any, he didn't have long-term care insurance. He was a veteran, but he wasn't a full TRICARE retired veteran. So there was some benefits, but not the kind that you really want when it comes to those scenarios. And with the hardships that we were dealing with, moving him from the hospital to the nursing home and then back home at my parents' house, I moved in with them after college for a year and needed a part-time job while we were shuffling him. And insurance was one of those, you can work your own hours. So I got my licenses, started with Medicare and long-term care and annuities, and I've been doing it ever since. And then I had the pleasure of meeting you about 8 years ago this September. And you were looking for someone, I think, that had the experience around the Medicare and the long-term care, because a lot of your clients have that need. And I think we first met at a Durham Bulls game. That's where you interviewed me. And after that's where it took off. And now I'm got my estate planning certification through your group. And, I'm learning things and, been working with some of the HD Reach clients for a few years, but just in this last year, started working with a nonprofit directly. Yeah. And I'm still learning a lot about it, but it's definitely a lot of things we can do to help.
If you think it's important for educational videos like this to get out there, then please help us out by subscribing to the channel.
Yeah. Well, Mike, your kind of journey towards what you do mirrored a lot of what I ended up doing. And it was really my grandmothers, both sides. My grandmother, my father's mother, she went through an awful lot when my grandfather passed on. And this was while I was in law school. And it just became this long-term mess for her. And it was because they didn't really plan ahead exactly the right way. They did what they were told to do, which was, we're just going to do a will. But there was something wrong on the deed, which caused everything to end up to be in probate. And so as I'm trying to answer my grandmother's questions, running around the law library as a student and trying to give her answers that she understood without her getting a bill from the attorney, I ended up trying to figure out how can all of this stuff be avoided. And that's really where I started to focus my practice when I got out and started working, set up my own law firm. It was to prevent problems by planning ahead the right way. And I did have several clients that we ended up working with along the way as preventatively. Now, on my grandmother's side, on my mother's side, She ended up needing to get Medicaid for nursing home care. And at the same time, my grandfather didn't want to have to lose everything. So my grandfather and my uncle worked with a person up in Rhode Island who really knew their stuff around Medicaid, and they were able to get everything together to save the house. So these were the two kind of family scenarios that got me into what I'm doing today. And just naturally along the way, I picked up clients who were like, wait a minute, here's this Huntington's disease. We don't want the family to have to lose everything. And eventually I got up with HD Reach, and I've been kind of doing things on and off for them for many years. So, but there are a lot of different scenarios that we run into as these kind of first questions, first inquiries, because not everybody simply says, I think I might have HD, or it runs in the family. Maybe I'm starting to get some symptoms. And that's when everybody starts looking for information, or if not information, looking for help. So we have some of these different scenarios. So the first one is, and I've been told this is kind of the most common scenario, and this is where we have a middle-aged married couple. One of them is really starting to have more symptoms and starting to need more help at home. And maybe there are kids in the picture, and they start calling up, look, what do we do? Because the spouse can't stay home and give them all the care that they need. They need to be working. Oh my gosh, what can we do? So that's the main scenario. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike a little bit on the care end, and then I'll talk a little bit just about the planning end as far as the legal documents. So handling that type of scenario when people first call in, Mike, what are some of the first things that you think they should be taking a look at?
Well, the first thing that I like to discuss with them is, what do they, what are they currently going through, like with the symptoms? Are they needing assistance with activities of daily living? Have they gotten to that point where maybe they're bedridden, or getting to like mobility is a big issue? That's where I think a lot of the stress and the frustration comes when the family is trying to navigate normal life, working, and having to provide the care for the one with the chronic condition. And that helps me determine very quickly if there are some financial solutions on the insurance side that can help solve some of the expense problems that they'll face.
Right. Now, this is probably a good point to mention that we've got a pretty detailed care assistance questionnaire that runs through a lot of these things. And look, people are busy, but taking the time to really go through and fill it out accurately not just gives us an idea of where you are financially and health-wise, but it's the way for you to focus and collect the kind of information that you're going to need regardless of where you're going in finding solutions. So that questionnaire helps Mike, and it helps me get where we need to go on that care end and the financial end.
Exactly. It's the more thorough you are with that, the better your consultation will be, your strategy sessions with us, and your care assistance plan. There's just different levels of what you can get and what you may need to do. So, just like a doctor, you wanted a physician that's going to give you a full examination before writing you a prescription.
Right.
If you're just going in there, and a lot of times it feels this way, you're sitting in the lobby for 2 hours and they put you in a room for 15 minutes. The doctor comes in for 5 minutes and barely looks at you, and he's like, here you go. You're going to be questioning a little bit about whether or not what they're giving you is the right thing. And I might want to mention also that I know a lot of times if you're already with the HD Reach group, then you're pretty aware of the Huntington's disease. But a lot of times the physicians, I think it's important that you find a doctor that's very familiar with it, because I've learned that a lot of doctors will misdiagnose symptoms as one thing, and they might send you down a path that's not the right one, whether it's certain drugs you might be given or treatments that's not going to be productive for what you need. So it's important to be
Right.
proactive with the HD Reach support group that they have, because they have the resources to help you get what you need.
Right. And that's one of the things we always make sure that we have very quick links to email you that questionnaire to gather that information. But
Absolutely.
also the good people at HD Reach also have access to that, and we can make sure they get copies, or they can just ask us to send it over to you. So the other thing now on the legal documents end, this is the basic plan, and sometimes that might be enough just to get started. You always need, for adults, a last will and testament, a healthcare power of attorney, a durable general power of attorney, a nomination of conservator. That's the document of, well, wait, if you need a guardian, even though you're an adult, somehow or another down the line, you might need a guardian. And then the fifth one is a living will. Now, the bonus document along with that is, well, if you have minor children and you need to make recommendations for who would be guardians if you couldn't do it anymore. So that's kind of the sixth document. Now, the easy way to look into all of that, and we're going to be talking about this a bit, there's the Free Simple Will Guide, freesimplewillguide.com. And it's geared for North Carolina, but it's generally applicable for all 50 states, because we don't talk about anything very, very specific for each state. It just goes through all of those different documents, what they do and what you need to look at. So that's really in that first scenario, the getting started. It's fill out the questionnaire, talk with me and Mike, and talk with people at HD Reach, and finding a good doctor who understands HD. Anything else you'd want to add on that particular scenario with the married couple and the potentially with minor kids?
Well, I would say, and this probably applies just general, you're going to want to sit down and really review all the current insurance options you have, whether it's through an employer or it's something that you've taken out privately. A lot of times you don't know the right questions to ask the insurance company to find out exactly what benefits you have. So it's part of our process is always, we're going to start there with reviewing current plans that may be in place and try to utilize those to the best we can. I think it's important that you really look into that stuff right away, even if you don't intend to file a claim, for example, because you can really exhaust resources to the point where a policy may not even be nearly as valuable as it would have been, because you're already at the stage of maybe needing to look for Medicaid, where we could have really maybe saved you a lot of time and frustration and money if we had just gotten a hold of that insurance policy with you 3 or 4 years prior and got started. I see that happen quite often. People are scared to just look at the stuff they have.
Well, and that actually brings up another point, and this is something I've ended up seeing. When people start seeing that there are some potential costs coming down the road, they tend to tighten up and say, do we really need this? Do we really need that? Do we really need this? And people will just end up letting certain types of insurance go that really could have somehow or another been a benefit. Even just life insurance, there are so many different options that you may have in an existing policy already. But if you're like, well, we just can't afford the expense of it without reviewing it, that could be a huge mistake as well.
That's a big one. Yeah, there are companies out there that are willing to sometimes purchase these policies from you.
Yeah.
And that creates a resource and an asset for you. And there's certain areas where that might not make sense. And that's why you got to talk to a professional.
Right. All right. So let's move into the second scenario. And honestly, this is the ideal for planning ahead. You've been diagnosed, but there are no symptoms yet. All right. There's a lot that we can start to take a look at in terms of on the legal in planning, as well as potentially planning for way down the road. So even if you have a diagnosis, but you're not symptomatic yet, there's time. And time, or actually lack of time, can be one of the biggest enemies on the planning end.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mike, what would you take a look at if someone is diagnosed but there's no symptoms yet? And what will we start looking at considering?
Well, you're going to face probably down the road potential mental cognitive issues, as well as
Mm-hmm.
assistance with just general activities of daily living. So having, if you've been diagnosed with Huntington's disease, I found that a lot of insurance companies, they have some simplified versions of what would be the grand type of long-term care protection,
Mm-hmm.
where the benefits may be reduced, but then the questionnaires to get the coverage are simplified and don't ask specific questions about the diseases that you might have.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about, are you currently in a assistance situation? And if you've not been there, then you still have the option to pick these policies up, which will be able to generally provide a pool of, $400 to $600 a day
Mm-hmm.
for skilled nursing care, general nursing care, physical therapy, occupational therapy. There's 10 to 12 categories that these plans pay for, in addition to home health aides, which
Mm-hmm.
can come in and take care of the basic stuff like cleaning and cooking. And really, it helps your caretakers, your family caretakers, still be able to do the things that they need to do.
Right.
Right. So we obviously want to try to get those plans in place as soon as possible. Um, yeah, I would say that's probably the number one thing I would look at on the financial planning side, is how do we get the insurance companies to come in and help with their wallet down the road.
Okay. Now, there's a whole bunch of opportunities on the legal end, and particularly the Medicaid planning end, if needed. So I'm just going to talk very briefly about them because we have two specific courses that are available online. I might as well give them now. There's freetrustcourse.com that talks about revocable living trusts, avoiding probate. But the thing is, when someone has HD, there's this kind of phase in the progression of HD where they become very reckless. They're still competent, but they get overloaded with feelings and emotions, and they may not make the wisest financial decisions. It's like, oh, well, here's this new best friend and I'm going to buy them a car. Well, wait a minute. Anyone who has assets that's titled in their own name under their control, well, okay, they can do whatever they want with it unless they're incompetent. Well, that reckless phase of HD is not legally incompetent. How can we potentially protect that? Well, if we're using a revocable living trust and the assets are going into the trust, we have very specific language for the doctors that can remove you as the trustee of your own trust if you're in that reckless phase and they start seeing those symptoms, even if you're not legally incapacitated. So it can cut off that potential financial end and reckless end of things so that you can have someone named as a trustee step in and start managing things. Now, on the Medicaid planning end, you're actually potentially giving up more control, even though you're capable of handling things. And even if you haven't entered that reckless stage, because what you're trying to do is get your assets into irrevocable trusts so that it starts the 5-year clock for Medicaid in case you need that end of the line skilled nursing care. Now, all that's done in coordination with the financial things you can do with insurance and other things like that. And this is why Mike and I really work together strongly on a lot of these cases, because we're balancing legal, we're balancing potential Medicaid benefits, and we're also looking at what can you do now that's going to protect you and provide for care and other expenses like that leading up to that. Now, for the Medicaid one, it's freemedicaidcourse.com. I think you might be seeing a trend here. So in those domain names. So both of those are good resources, but they're particularly beneficial if you have assets and you're not really symptomatic yet, but you got the diagnosis. All right. So going to another scenario, this isn't even the person who's been diagnosed with HD. It's the family members who, when they realize, oh, I have another family member who has HD, I haven't even been diagnosed yet. Is there anything that I should be doing? And this is also why Mike and I end up sometimes working with families, because it's not just the person who needs the help and the care. We're looking out for the whole family. So what are some of the first things, Mike, that you would recommend for those kind of adult family members if they've got someone in the family that's in the throes of HD or they've been diagnosed? What can they do to protect themselves?
Absolutely. Well, I definitely would say the first thing to do is to really take a look at the care assistance questionnaire.
Yeah.
Right. You want to really take the time to fill that out thoroughly. And then based on the information that we see from there, I would lean towards probably the first thing I would say is, okay, you're going to do a little financial planning here. We're going to look at long-term care insurance. That's going to be a big piece. Without having a diagnosis or any type of what the insurance industry would say, like a red flag on your medical records, you're going to have the opportunity to get a very comprehensive type of plan in place. And that's important because once you cross that threshold of insurability, then the options go down quite a bit. And it's one of those things that you got to proactively plan it before you need it, right? It's like if you wreck a car and you call an insurance company and say, hey, I need auto insurance, I just got in a car accident. They're not going to insure your car, right? It has to be done prior. And it's the same thing. If you've had a lot of accidents in the past, then the insurance companies that are willing to insure you are going to go down, and the price you're going to pay is going to go way up. So it's like that with medical conditions in a way. The cleaner bill of health you have, the way less it's going to cost you to get the best options out there. And we work independently with every insurance carrier that's available. So we're not representing one or two. We're going to go out there and see what's the latest and the greatest that's available, and compare to find out what makes the most sense.
Okay. Yeah. Now, on the legal end, there's at the very least, it's the basic, the basic 5 documents, sometimes 6 if you actually have children. This is the basic estate plan that every adult should need, or maybe more, but you can actually read more about it at freesimplewillguide.com. This is actually a free report we have. Even though it's geared for North Carolina, the concepts in the report are for everybody. So even if you're not in North Carolina, please feel free to go ahead and download that. Again, it's freesimplewillguide.com. And it's the last will and testament, healthcare power of attorney, durable general power of attorney, or the financial power of attorney, as we like to call it, a nomination of conservator, which is really a guardian for you. And then there's the living will that talks about the very end life and, whether you want artificial nutrition and hydration or extraordinary means and life support and things like that, if you've reached the point where the doctors have said, you're not coming back. And then there's the 6th bonus one, an appointment of guardian if you do have minor children. So, all right, that's the very basic one. There's also how to avoid probate and have more options in keeping things out of court with freetrustcourse.com. So that might be a way of looking at the planning in a way that's going to solidify things. This is also an important point. If you have a revocable living trust and your assets are in the revocable living trust, then your successor trustee can step in if you can't handle things and they manage it. They don't have to go to court and get a guardian assigned in order to take control of the assets inside the trust. So the more that's inside the trust or in conjunction with the power of attorney, the less court involvement, the better. So that's just on the legal end, taking a look and making sure that stuff is sewn up as tight as possible, even though you don't have symptoms and even if you're not diagnosed yet. That's not a bad thing to stop and take a look at.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So now we do have there's another scenario which unfortunately happens way too often. And from what I've been told from the good people at HD Reach, people are getting very, very bad advice. And this is around juvenile HD. So if a child has HD and they're turning 18, apparently the banks are just telling them, oh, just go to court and get guardianship. Well, wait a minute here. That's asking the court to come in and oversee a whole bunch of things that they might not need to take care of, because a legal adult, as long as they are legally competent, as you know, they know who they are, they know who their family members are, they have a decent idea of what their assets are. Even if they have HD and they have some limitations, it doesn't mean that they're not capable of executing those documents. So why go to court to get guardianship and actually have their rights as an individual, as an adult, stripped away from them? They can't do their banking at that point. Why do that when they can simply have a power of attorney that names people to help them in these areas? Now, on the financial planning end, Mike, most of the time, this is more about securing whatever the parents and the family may leave to them. So, you know, we can talk about the planning that the parents need to do, but this might also be something to take a look at some of the potential very long-term care needs and seeing, is life insurance something that they should be looking at?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing quite as efficient when it comes to leaving behind assets as life insurance. You know, it's generally going to be something that can be received in a short amount of time. And it's, in most cases, it's always going to be tax-free. So there's a lot of less steps involved with the transfer. You know, you're not involving the court system. You're not involving moving from one custodian or one company and financial company to another, managing all that. It's usually just, you know, a couple documents, proof of the insured having deceased, and then they're going to issue a check to the name of the beneficiary, or you know, deposit it right into an account. And I think this is where having a trust set up is a great tool, because then the funds can go directly into that trust. That trust already has what the expectations are for the beneficiary, which in this case would be the juvenile, right? Trustees there to manage that, and that doesn't allow the juvenile to lose any special benefits they may be getting from the state or the federal government, because they're not receiving that money directly. So the estate piece is a huge part of that kind of planning, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not just having the insurance.
No,
because the last thing you should do is have that life insurance and name your child who's going to need the care, naming them as the beneficiary. They could lose whatever benefits they're getting. But if it gets over to a trust that's locked up tight, then that's also something. Now, I'm going to go ahead. I know we have a couple of different webinars. I'm actually going to put it in the description, or put a little bar there about where you can actually go to a webinar that talks about special needs planning. In fact, it may very well be specialneedsplanningwebinar.com. That you can get some more information on that, and it's setting things up so that it goes there for the benefit of your child or adult child without disqualifying them from benefits. Right. There's another scenario where people are usually asking, okay, my spouse they've been diagnosed with HD, or they're symptomatic, or it's progressed quite a bit, and we're trying to look at Medicaid and things like that. Should we get divorced? Whoa, hold on. There's plenty of things that could potentially be done up to that point. It's not the most common thing to say, oh, just get divorced. Here's the thing about North Carolina and a whole bunch of other states. All right, you now need 2 divorce attorneys. You need to hammer out this agreement so that one spouse is getting the bulk of everything. It needs to go through the court system. And then in North Carolina, you have to be living separate and apart for a year. Well, most people don't want to do that. They're talking about getting divorced in order to get benefits. There are so many other different things that can be done. But even, depending on where the progression is, what if you're looking way, way, way down the road? It's like, hey, I don't see how we're ever going to be able to afford care out of pocket, even though right now we're just at a diagnosis or, a couple of symptoms. Mike, there are so many other financial things that they can start to look at first. And then even if the disease has progressed quite a bit, well, the other spouse also needs some potential help there. So, Mike, can you tell us a little bit about that kind of financial and insurance end for the spouse who has the diagnosis or maybe the symptoms, and then also the spouse who doesn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, income insurance vehicles available. Think of it like you can create a self pension using an annuity. I think one of the big takeaways is you want to be able to care for the one who has who has Huntington's disease and needs the care, but also you have to think about the spousal that's going to be left by themselves eventually down the road, and making sure that they're covered. So there can be, lifetime, what we call joint lifetime withdrawal benefits, where you've set up, say, an IRA or another type of account like a CD or something that you have at the bank that's really not doing a whole lot for you there, and move it into an insurance vehicle that's going to provide a lifetime income for the both of you. So you're helping to cover maybe some of the expenses and the gaps you have from your other income for the medical care, but you're also ensuring that income is for the remainder of both spouses for the rest of their lives. Yeah. So one passes, whether it's the symptomatic individual or the other one. A lot of times the age difference between the spouses, the one with HD may be several years younger than the other spouse. And there's a concern that what happens when the older spouse passes away and there's still the need for the care for the younger one. So that's where those joint income plans and really just looking at what's available out there. Interest rates are high, so insurance companies tend to follow the trend. So as with rates being high, it's a very good time to look at what kind of guarantees you can get. Payout percentages of 7, 8, 9% for the rest of your life from your accounts. So that's a big planning factor.
Yeah. Now, and also on the legal and planning end, both spouses should be taking into account their documents, the main ones. Okay, a last will and testament. All right, that, on the estate planning end, there are potential trust things. I don't want to go too deeply into that. For that, we've got freetrustcourse.com. And then in particular, freemedicaidcourse.com if we're talking about irrevocable trust. But they should each have their own at least last will and testament, if not more, healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, nomination of conservator, and living will. And if there are minor children, then you also need that appointment of guardian form. And that's available again at the freesimplewillguide.com. So the freesimplewillguide.com is going to have a report that you can download and walk through those different documents and some of the decisions that you need to make. Now, on the Medicaid planning end, if it's at the end of the line, it's like, okay, you don't even necessarily need to get divorced because there are so many things and so many techniques that we can do now to shift assets over to the spouse who does not need that skilled care right away, and set things up in such a way that if not all, usually it's not all, but most, or at least the majority of the assets can be preserved in this process, still get the care that you need through the various programs, including Medicaid, without having to get divorced. So there are so many other things to look at legally and financially first. All right. So this is, I'm sorry if you had something else to throw in there, Mike.
There was one scenario that comes to mind, and it's you know, their spouse has Huntington's disease, and they've declined very rapidly in the last, say, 12 months. And things have been managed okay by the family and the support network they have. The individual is already receiving certain benefits from the state and maybe the federal Medicare program. Maybe they're on disability, they have Medicare. You know, Medicaid is kind of going to be what they know they're facing. They're looking at that as what the next option is, or self-paying for, you know, we're talking going from the home to a facility specifically, right? There are Medicare plans that are specifically designed for these scenarios. So you absolutely want to be looking into those. They have special benefits like unlimited transportation, monthly allowances for groceries, food, and rent. These are benefits that are not on the standard Medicare plans that individuals have. So these are only for folks that have chronic conditions or receive state assistance or are in a facility. So you want to be looking at these plans. They're county specific. So you want to be working with a professional. Like in my situation, when I work with clients on this, we're going to look at all the plans in the county that are called special needs plans, and do any of these help with the situation? But I mean, there's a lot that you can do on the healthcare side, the health insurance side too. So it's not always just about the long-term care insurance or the financial planning. It's okay. We also have to look at what health insurance options are out there, because there could be a lot of benefits there too.
Okay. All right. Now here's one other scenario that does come up. It's a much younger adult. There's no symptoms. We're not talking about juvenile HD. It's just, okay, they're, out of school, they're working, and they're like, all right, I know HD runs in the family. No diagnosis, no nothing. But look, I need to get things. I want to get my ducks in a row. It's good that we have people that look that far ahead. So what are some of the things that they should be looking at to protect themselves and an eventual family that they may not even have yet? What should they be looking at?
Well, when you're young like that, the best scenario usually is to look at, say, a term type of insurance policy that has living benefits built in. When you're young, you can leverage your age to obtain a very large benefit. It's not set up to be permanent, but it is something that you can get a large amount of coverage. And then if you have a chronic condition all of a sudden develop very rapidly, the insurance company will accelerate the death benefit while you're alive through what they call a chronic illness or critical illness rider. And This can be, if you have $1 million policy, a $2 million policy, this could be a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 acceleration tax free. And something like this can be obtained for, $30 a month, $20 a month because you're young, right? So I would be looking at leveraging term type coverage to get a large pool of money in case something changes before unexpectedly or sooner than you expected.
Right. And at the very least, you should have the basic estate planning documents. So last will and testament, healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, nomination of conservator, living will. Or if you're not quite so young enough that you don't have minor children, all right, you always need to also have an appointment of guardian form, just in case someone needs to raise those minor kids if anything happens to you. But that's at the basic level.
Mm-hmm.
If you're really looking to plan further ahead, well, revocable living trust might not be a bad idea. So for the simple will stuff, you can go to freesimplewillguide.com. And if you're looking at avoiding probate, being a little more secure in the assets, if anything does happen to you, there's freetrustcourse.com. All right, so this is probably a good time to walk into the big four questions. Now, I always tell people estate planning should be easy on your part, and often attorneys kind of overcomplicate things needlessly. So here are the big four questions, and we'll take this one at a time and talk a little bit about it. Look, the first big question you really need to consider is, who do you want handling financial things for you if you can't do those things yourself? Now, this isn't about, oh, well, who's the power of attorney? Who's the executor? Who's the trustee? It's no. Look, it's just one thing. It's one list. You want to have one person who's in charge of all that stuff. If they can't do it, you've got a backup. And if they can't do it, all right, you've got a third just in case person. Now, one thing you absolutely should not do is, oh, well, I've got 3 kids. Let's put all 3 of them together. No. That just kind of triples the paperwork. It leads to fights. One person at a time. Look, if you want to name all 3 kids, do it in order. So this is really, if you're incapacitated, you're going to want this person handling things for you. So, Mike, what are some of these financial things that a power of attorney or a trustee should be able to do on their behalf in working with their assets?
Well, great question. So the first thing is paying premium bills or bills in general. Not too many times I've seen where someone is behind on insurance payments and they're getting very close to the time where they would actually use these type of policies, whether it's long-term care or life insurance. And the power of attorney gives someone permission to be able to just do general business with the company, ask questions about the policy, get details, request statements, and things like that. I have a scenario I can go through specifically, where we're dealing with someone whose father was declining quite rapidly in the last 6 months, and had a life insurance policy that he had had for 30 years, and had been paying premiums quarterly by check for his entire life. And the policy started to have an issue where the cost of insurance was increased and the premium was not enough to keep the policy in place. So a little bit additional premium needed to be added to keep it in force. And the individual knew he was terminally ill, but wasn't cognitively realizing that he needed to pay more than usual. And so having a power of attorney would have helped, say, a family member or the person you've chosen to be able to inquire with that insurance company. Mm-hmm. Okay, what do we owe? What's going on with the policy? We don't want to lose this because it's probably going to get used in the next year. And without that document, they're really going to tell you, well, we have to speak to the insured. And if the insured's incapacitated, well, there you go. Maybe or it could be in any type of IRA account, somewhere where you maybe need to have income generated. You need to do withdrawals, things like that. You're going to have to be the owner or the power of attorney for the owner. So the only other way to do it is go through an entire court process, is my understanding. You'd have to go and get guardianship or something like that. And that could take way longer than you need it to be. Not only that, be frustrating and expensive, time consuming.
And it's also wide open. And any one of those 3 kids, if you weren't married, could say, I should be the person in charge. And the other, I should be in charge. And now it's a big thing, more than it needed to be. So these financial people are taking care of you. And usually this is asked in an estate planning, context. It's not just about who's administering your estate. It's who's taking care of you financially at the same time.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Second big question in all of this: who do you want making healthcare decisions for you if you can't do this? So who's going to talk with the doctors, decide on courses of treatment, surgery A versus surgery B? And, who's going to sign all of that paperwork? Well, okay, you're looking really at the same thing. You have one person. If they can't do it, there's a backup. And if they can't do it, there's a third. It doesn't have to be the same people that's handling finances. So this is something to, take a look separately at people's skill sets. Someone who may be good with finances doesn't necessarily need to be in charge of making healthcare and medical decisions for you. And at the same time, the person who's making, healthcare shouldn't necessarily be the person doing finance. They might have different skill sets. And this is a problem I sometimes see. Everybody's, quote, trying to find Superman or Wonder Woman, someone who can do it all. Well, no, you can divide these duties up among people who are good at one area or the other. So on the healthcare end, you're definitely interacting more with the doctors on that end. But this also sometimes calls for coordination with that financial person, particularly if you're talking about health insurance, long-term care insurance, and things like that. It's good that they should be able to work together. Any thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah. Well, I think, it's important, like you said, it's not always the same person, but the healthcare power of attorney is certainly not going to be able to call the long-term care insurance company and say, hey, we need to start a claim process. Right. You're going to do the general power of attorney would be that form, but you're going to want to know, okay, maybe you need to know more about the health scenario on what should we be doing, right? Like,
right.
Should we be filing a claim at this point? Are you eligible for it? What doctor forms do we have to get signed? You're going to be working together.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Now, this is, I guess it's almost like a separate kind of question, because we get this. What if you don't have anyone, either for making healthcare decisions or for making financial decisions, or both? Now, there are some alternatives that are out there. There are trust companies and professional fiduciaries who will agree to kind of be in line to make those types of decisions and manage things for you. So on the financial end, those trust companies, they can manage your assets, pay for the bills, work to protect you, but yes, they sometimes, look, they're going to get paid for what they have to do. On the healthcare end, there are certain care managers. In particular, I've seen a few geriatric care managers who will agree to be the healthcare power of attorney. And it's not even, you don't necessarily have anyone. But if you are, like, say, in Raleigh, North Carolina, and you've got two kids, one of them's in Alaska and the other's in Hawaii, that makes it very difficult for them to be making healthcare decisions for you, particularly if there's some ongoing need for healthcare decisions or taking care of you. It sometimes makes sense at that point, if you don't have anybody local, to have someone do this professionally. All right, so let's talk about the third big question. This is the estate piece. And, Mike, you know, a lot of our clients that we've worked together with, they sometimes hate this question. It's who gets what, when do they get it, and how. After you're gone, who's getting all of your stuff? And the reason they hate it is because I keep killing off their loved ones in these scenarios to see where the money goes. Now, this is something that, Mike, I know you've seen this. We talk about, here's where everything goes. Well, if this person passes on, here's where their share goes. If this person passes on, it goes here. What if these people aren't there? Well, then it goes over here. So we run through these scenarios to kind of put together contingencies, because people don't necessarily keep up with their estate plan the way they should every single year, just making sure that everything's okay. So we want to build in a little bit of contingency. Now, this is great. This ends up going into the will or the trust, but this is an important point. And I know, Mike, you probably come across this. That's the answer to your question. That's what's in the document, but that might not be what's listed on the beneficiary designations on a lot of these things. So there has to be coordination. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially whenever I find that some advisors tend to overlook the importance of spending the right amount of time on that part of just the account opening, the setup, right? Whether it's an application or it's, setting up an account, paperwork, documents. They're more concerned about just getting the managing the money and getting the money over, that they'll rush through that section if the client's not prepared to answer it. Oh, well, we can just list your wife and go from there. No, you
list the wife, and then we'll list your kids as the beneficiaries, as your contingent beneficiaries.
Yeah, just whatever they can think of, not knowing the unintended consequences of what that might entail. Right?
Yeah. Right. Now, here's the thing. Whether it's a will or a trust, often my clients will want some kind of age limit. They don't want them inheriting any assets too young. But that insurance person who's rushing through setting up, and it's not just the insurance people, it's also like HR. If you're starting a new job and they're setting up the 401k
right,
life insurance through the company.
Usually, the insurance.
Well, your kids are 15 and 13. Okay, then they inherit all of that money at 18 if you and your spouse die. That's not what I want. That's what's not in the plan. So you need to make sure that if you're doing something like a trust or even a testamentary trust through a will with an age limit, you have to make it all coordinate with the financial assets, insurance, and other things so that it all lines up together.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the best advantages of the trust when it comes to being the beneficiary is, your trust always, you don't have to go back and change your beneficiary on 4 or 5 different accounts or policies. If you make a change to your trust and the trust of the beneficiary, then everything's done as soon as you make the amendment to your trust, right? If you change your beneficiary to the trust or percentage, well, it's all automatic. All right. Okay. And that's a big time saver. But, when people change jobs, they forget about these 401k plans they might have set up. They just kind of sit there at the former employer for several years. And the beneficiaries might be outdated. Things change. Minors, a lot of times you're not going to list a minor because they can only access so much money anyway. Right. Like one of the problems I've seen is where, against my own advice, clients have said, well, no, I want to list this person as a beneficiary. Then they unexpectedly passed away. and then the 15-year-old is not allowed to just inherit $80,000. The state
Yeah.
doesn't allow it, right? So then
Yeah.
the parent has to go through becoming guardian in order to
Mm-hmm.
be able to file the claim and get control of the money, right? And that's a
Yeah.
whole long, frustrating, expensive process versus if you had just had the right estate document set up and you had just listed maybe that as that. Well, then your trustee is going to be able to file the claim, no court involved. They'll manage the money based on what you told them in the trust until they reach
Mm-hmm.
a certain age. And it's just such more organized, more efficient, and thorough way of doing things. So.
Yeah. And it's important to also keep on top of those things as your plans change, like you said. Uh, I know I don't know if you've had a lot of this. I have talked with other people who have had this happen with some of their clients, particularly with life insurance. They get a policy, they name their spouse, they get divorced, get remarried, and they never update that stuff. And that life insurance may end up going to an ex-spouse because that's the way the beneficiary designation read. So some states have different laws that will cut it off, but look, it's not unheard of for an
No,
ex-spouse to get the money because you didn't update the beneficiaries. Just redoing your will doesn't override that.
I was just reading about in an article about an ex-girlfriend from like 25, 30 years ago inherited $1 million
Yeah.
401k because the owner never updated the beneficiary after they broke up. And
Yeah.
there's a whole family that's like, that's our family's money, and it's going to this ex-girlfriend that maybe been
Yeah.
in the person's life for a few years when they were in college or right out of
Yeah.
college. And so, yeah, the beneficiary is making sure that's one of the things we do during the care assistance strategy session is we make sure that we're going to go over all your beneficiaries with all your assets. And
Right.
you might need to change that because of the care situation too.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the fourth big question in all of this is who's going to raise your minor children if anything happens to you? So sometimes, depending on the situation, the kids may be older or there may not be any kids. We don't necessarily have to get to it, but it's definitely worth considering. And it's the same thing as the first two questions. You want one person. If they can't do it, there's a backup. And if they can't do it, there's a third. You don't want co-anything. And this is particularly where people are like, oh, no, I want my brother and my sister-in-law. Well, look, there's currently, I believe there's like a 60% divorce rate. No, you don't want your brother and sister-in-law. You want your brother who happens to be married to the sister-in-law. One person at a time. And now this other thing that it happens so often. Oh, I know that even if my brother is divorced from his wife, she would still do the right thing. Well, okay, put her in that second spot if that's really what you want to do. But don't put anybody as co. And you do want at least 3 people in that succession. Now, remember, this is all about raising the kids. It has nothing to do with the money. The money is all handled by the person you're choosing to do the financial things. So that last one just kind of rounds out really guardianship for any minor children. All right. So I think, Mike, we've covered an awful lot of good stuff in this session today. In fact, this might be cut up into multiple good videos that can be helpful. So just to kind of review, you can contact either me or Mike, and we can get the process started to help you out. We've got, in particular, when it comes to working with HD Reach and some of the people that they're connected with, we do have a really good care assistance questionnaire that either Mike or my office can go ahead and get over to you. But we also have some online resources to take a look at. There's the freesimplewillguide.com. So that's your kind of free report. It says North Carolina, but it's generally applicable because it's very basic and talks about different documents and what they do and some of the decisions you need to make. There's also freetrustcourse.com that runs through revocable living trusts and the basics of avoiding probate. But if we're starting to get into potentially needing Medicaid to pay for long-term care, there's freemedicaidcourse.com. Now, to get in touch with me, you can always get in touch with me through my law firm. Our website is livingtrustlawfirm.com. And the number at the office is 919-844-7993. You can reach Mike through us, but Mike, you've also got your own website and phone number that people can get to. So go ahead. What do you have for that?
Well, my website is www.safeassetfinancial.com. And we do have a nice monthly blog there. And one of the best ones we have is the Care Assistance Planning blog. And I believe that's accessible through the HD Reach website on their specific financial planning, care assistance planning section. So, and very easily to obtain there. So that'll get you towards that information. And it's just a broad general article on what care assistance planning is. And we recommend that you start there to, just to give yourself a little bit of education.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again for being with us today. Again, this is Jeff Marsacci, the Plain English attorney, and Mike Brooks, our asset coordinator and a great financial and insurance guru. So thanks again, Mike, for being with us.
You're welcome, Jeff. And I thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Now, as I always tell my clients, please stay safe, plan ahead, and enjoy life. And whatever you do, make it a great day.